Thunder rolled over Chicago as Lucas Barrett stepped out of his black Audi, the valet sprinting toward him with an umbrella. The neon lights of the Aurelia Hotel shimmered across the rain-slick pavement, and the revolving doors spun with the quiet luxury only money could buy. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed, perfumed air whispering of wealth and power. Lucas adjusted his cufflinks, glancing at his reflection in the glass, mid-40s, tailored suit, hair perfectly in place, a man who looked like he had conquered life. To everyone else, he was the CEO of Barrett Investments, the golden boy who turned a dying firm into a financial empire. But behind that polished image hid the man who had long stopped believing in his own goodness. Inside the lounge, under soft amber lighting, sat the reason for his growing shame. Her name was Sienna Holt. Younger by nearly 2 decades, she had eyes like wildfire and the kind of confidence that drew him in when the world made him feel hollow. When Lucas saw her lift her glass and smile, guilt stabbed through his chest, but he walked forward anyway. "You're late," Sienna teased as he sat down. "Traffic," he lied, though the truth was that he had sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, staring at the contact photo of his wife, Marissa. Sienna reached across the table, her manicured fingers brushing his wrist. "You work too much. You need nights like this." Lucas tried to smile. Maybe you're right. Maybe she was. Or maybe this was just another night he'd regret. An hour later, they entered the elevator that led to the top-floor suite. The walls mirrored their reflections, and Lucas caught sight of himself standing beside her, 2 people who didn't belong together. The silence pressed heavy, and when the doors opened, the penthouse spread before them like a palace. Gold fixtures, white orchids, and a skyline that stretched to infinity. Sienna stepped in, laughing softly. "You really know how to impress a woman." Lucas forced a grin. "It's just a hotel." But it wasn't. The Aurelia wasn't just any hotel, it was a place he and Marissa had once dreamed of owning together. A symbol of the future they'd wanted before life turned into business meetings and separate dinners. As Sienna poured champagne, Lucas's phone buzzed. The screen lit with one name that never failed to pierce his heart, Marissa. Sienna noticed. "Don't tell me you're answering that." He hesitated, staring at the glowing name before flipping the phone over. "Not tonight." "Good," she said, slipping her arms around his waist. "Because tonight's ours." But even as she kissed him, the warmth in his chest was replaced by a hollow ache. Guilt wasn't a voice anymore, it was a scream. Later that night, while Sienna slept, Lucas stood by the window. The city lights below looked cold, merciless. He thought of Marissa's laugh, the one that used to fill their home, and how easily he had traded it for moments that meant nothing. In the reflection of the glass, he barely recognized himself. Morning came with sunlight slicing through the curtains. Sienna stirred under the sheets as Lucas reached for his phone. Missed calls. Messages. One voicemail from his assistant, Dana. "Mr. Barrett," her voice trembled, "just confirming you'll be attending the Aurelia's grand reopening this morning." Mrs. Barrett arrived early to finalize the deal. Lucas froze. He played the message again, each word turning to ice in his veins. Marissa was here. At the same hotel. The same room type. He turned sharply. "Sienna, get dressed." She blinked. "What's wrong?" "We need to leave. Now." "Lucas, it's barely 8. Please. Just trust me." His voice shook, and that scared her enough to obey. As she pulled on her dress, Lucas buttoned his shirt with trembling hands. Panic gripped him like a vice. Maybe they could slip out unnoticed. Maybe this was just bad timing. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into judgment. Lucas stared at the numbers blinking above the doors, praying fate would give him a break. When the elevator opened to the lobby, he froze. Cameras. Reporters. Applause. A crowd had gathered before the main entrance, where a gleaming gold ribbon stretched across the doors. A banner read, "The Aurelia Hotel, grand reopening under new ownership." Lucas's stomach twisted. Then he saw her. Marissa Barrett stood at the podium, elegant and composed in a white suit. Her presence radiated strength, not bitterness. Her chestnut hair framed a calm face that once smiled only for him. Sienna's hand tightened around his arm. "Lucas, is that?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. His throat closed as Marissa adjusted the microphone, her voice steady, graceful. "Good morning, everyone. Today marks not just the reopening of the Aurelia, but a new beginning. When I took ownership, I wanted this place to stand for renewal, for rebuilding after betrayal." Lucas's heart nearly stopped. The crowd applauded, oblivious to the invisible storm between them. Sienna's face went pale. "She knows," she whispered. Lucas could only stare as Marissa's gaze swept the crowd and landed on him. For one agonizing second, her eyes locked onto his, recognition, pain, and something deeper flickering beneath the surface. But she didn't falter. She smiled politely and continued, "We all make choices that define who we are. Some lift us, some break us. But what matters is who we become afterward." Each word struck him harder than the last. Lucas wanted to disappear. He turned to leave, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. Marissa's voice rose again. "To everyone standing here today, this hotel represents more than success. It represents strength. The courage to let go of what no longer deserves a place in your heart." The applause thundered, but Lucas barely heard it. All he could see was the woman he had betrayed standing taller than he ever remembered, shining in a way that didn't need him anymore. Sienna tugged at his sleeve. "Lucas, let's go." But he couldn't move. His mind spun with memories, the nights Marissa stayed up balancing their early bills, the way she believed in him when investors laughed at his dreams. He had broken something sacred, and now the world was watching him face it. Reporters swarmed the podium, shouting questions about her acquisition. Marissa smiled gracefully, saying, "My goal is to make the Aurelia a place of truth, a sanctuary for those ready to start over." The words hung heavy in the air, and Lucas felt every one like a knife to his chest. She wasn't just speaking to them. She was speaking to him. He turned toward the exit, but before he could move, Marissa's voice echoed once more. "One more thing before we open the doors." The crowd fell silent. "I'd like to dedicate this hotel to anyone who ever lost themselves trying to please someone else. To those who forgot their worth until life reminded them." Her eyes flicked briefly to Lucas again. "This is your reminder." The audience erupted into applause, but all Lucas heard was the quiet sound of his world collapsing. He stood frozen in the crowd as Marissa cut the ribbon, smiling at cameras while his life unraveled quietly in the background. Sienna slipped away without another word, her heels clicking sharply across the marble. Lucas stayed. Not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't move. Watching Marissa, he realized she hadn't just taken ownership of a hotel. She had taken ownership of her story, of her strength, of the part of herself he had once dimmed. And for the first time in his life, Lucas Barrett, the man who built an empire from ambition, finally understood what it meant to lose everything that mattered. Lucas stood motionless in the lobby long after the ribbon was cut, the noise of celebration swirling around him like distant thunder. Marissa was shaking hands with city officials, smiling for the cameras, effortlessly radiant. Every flash of light from the press felt like a knife turning deeper into his chest. He wanted to leave, to vanish into the anonymity of the crowd, but his feet refused to move. He couldn't take his eyes off her. There she was, the woman who had believed in him when no one else did, standing taller, freer, and stronger than he had ever seen her. Dana, his assistant, approached him nervously. "Mr. Barrett," she whispered, should I call for your car?" Lucas blinked, realizing for the first time how pale he looked. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." His heart pounded as he watched Marissa glide through the lobby. She was gracious, professional, untouchable. He'd seen that look before, the one she wore when she decided she was done waiting for someone to change. As the crowd thinned, Marissa turned, her gaze finding him again. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt electric, tense, full of things they'd never said. "Marissa," Lucas started, stepping closer. She held up a hand. "Not here." He stopped. "Please. Just 5 minutes." Her expression softened just enough to let him follow her into a quiet hallway behind the ballroom. The noise of the celebration faded, leaving only the hum of distant music. Marissa stood by a window, sunlight tracing the line of her jaw. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly. "I didn't know," Lucas replied, his voice cracking. "I didn't know this was your..." She turned to face him. "Your mistress's playground?" "No, I imagine you didn't." He flinched, her words slicing clean through him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I swear, I..." "Save it," she said softly, almost wearily. "You think I didn't know, Lucas? You think I couldn't tell when your eyes stopped lighting up at home, when your phone became more interesting than dinner, when the scent on your jacket wasn't mine?" His throat tightened. "Marissa, I made a mistake." "No," she interrupted. "You made a choice." Silence. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw the exhaustion beneath her calm. "I spent years standing beside you while you built everything. The company, the image, the empire. I thought we were building it together. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your partner." "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. Marissa's lips trembled, but she steadied herself. "Love isn't what you say, Lucas. It's what you do." He took a step closer. "I'll do anything to make this right. I'll end it with her, I'll..." She shook her head. "You already ended it the moment you brought her here." The words hit like a slap. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but nothing he could say would sound like truth anymore. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Marissa sighed. "When I bought this hotel, it wasn't about revenge. I didn't even know you'd be here. It was about finding myself again. About building something that was mine." Lucas's voice dropped to a whisper. "You always had everything that mattered." Her eyes softened just slightly. "Then why did you throw it away?" He couldn't answer. She looked away, staring through the window at the skyline. "You know, when the board told me the Aurelia was up for sale, I hesitated. It was your favorite hotel, our dream once. But then I realized, it's just bricks and glass. What mattered was what I turned it into." Lucas swallowed hard. "And what is that?" Marissa smiled faintly. "A place that doesn't tolerate lies." He nodded slowly, pain twisting his chest. "You deserve better than me." "You're right," she said simply. The finality in her tone broke something in him. For years, Lucas had thought power meant control, over markets, over people, over outcomes. But standing there, stripped of excuses, he understood real power was walking away from what no longer deserved you. "Marissa, I..." She turned, her voice soft but resolute. "Lucas, don't waste this moment with apologies. Just do one thing for me. Anything. Be the man our children think you are." That single sentence shattered what was left of his pride. He lowered his head, eyes burning. "I don't know if I can." "You can," she said. "But not by coming back to me." A long silence filled the space. Then Marissa stepped past him, her perfume lingering like memory. "Goodbye, Lucas." She walked away without looking back. He stood alone, staring at the reflection in the glass. For the first time, he saw the truth clearly: the empire he built was nothing but walls around emptiness. Hours later, the lobby was quiet again. The banners were gone, the reporters had left. Lucas sat in the hotel cafe, nursing a cup of untouched coffee, replaying every word she said. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady. Through the window, he saw Marissa's car pull away from the valet. He didn't follow. That night, Lucas went home to an empty penthouse. The silence there was louder than anything he'd ever heard. On his desk sat a framed photo of Marissa and their 2 children, taken years ago on a beach in Florida. He picked it up, tracing his fingers across their smiling faces. He realized then that the life he once took for granted wasn't something he could rebuild with money. It was something he had to earn through humility and time, if time would grant him the mercy. Months passed. Lucas sold his company shares and stepped down as CEO. He started working with small community projects, funding shelters, mentoring young entrepreneurs who reminded him of who he used to be before success poisoned his heart. He never saw Sienna again. She moved to Los Angeles, chasing her own version of happiness. He didn't blame her. One afternoon, Lucas received a letter in the mail. No return address, just his name written in handwriting he knew by heart. Inside was a simple note. Lucas. I heard about the scholarships you've been funding. That's the man I once believed in. Maybe this is your new beginning too. M. He smiled faintly, tears blurring the ink. Lucas folded the letter carefully, placing it beside the old photograph on his desk. The rain outside had stopped, and sunlight was breaking through the clouds. He stood by the window, looking out at the city. It was still ruthless, still loud, but it no longer owned him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel trapped by guilt. He felt free. Because sometimes, losing everything isn't the end, it's the beginning of finally finding yourself. And as he watched the sunlight stretch across the skyline, Lucas Barrett whispered to no one, "Thank you, Marissa." The wind carried the words away, leaving behind a man who had finally learned what success was supposed to mean. Not money. Not power. Not ownership. But peace. And that, at last, was something he could live with.